I mean, talking primarily from a TAFE perspective, quite often international students and the recruitment and marketing for international students is quite separate from other activities within the Institute. And while that's not necessarily a problem in itself, it misses, I think, quite a few other opportunities of both supporting the students and increasing the number of students that come to the institution. So clearly the opportunity for people working in student recruitment and marketing, the opportunity for them to go and spend time in other sections and other departments within the TAFE Institute, I think has tremendous benefits, as well as the opportunity to find out what other activities are happening in the international sphere in that institute. One of the key elements for our TAFE institutes is that when we're going offshore to promote and encourage students to come and study in Australia, is that we really need to understand the legal and the legislative environment in those countries. And quite often a lot of work's been done before that between our government agencies and the respective governments in other countries. So I think it's important for all marketers and recruiters to have a really good understanding of what bilateral and multilateral agreements and memorandums of understanding are in existence, because quite often that can smooth the pathway in terms of the legitimacy of the institution and the value of studying in Australia. We've done a survey recently for Austrade under the Asian Business Engagement Plan, and we identified well over 140 partnerships between our TAFE institutes and local colleges in other countries, with almost 50,000 students studying an Australian qualification in their own country. I often wonder how much effort effort has gone into either encouraging those students themselves to continue study in Australia, or to at least use that as a springboard for further marketing. At the moment, a lot of our TAFEs rely very heavily on agents, both onshore and offshore, and I think whoever from an institute travels offshore, part of their role should not be just to support a particular commercial or business project, but also to look at opportunities of promoting study in Australia. And even within the TAFE system, you know, they're all in a sense owned by their respective state and territory governments, and particularly in Victoria, where they're independent or sort of semi-independent institutes, they're very competitive amongst themselves. And then we've got another level of competition between the states and territories. And then we've got another level of competition between the different sectors. In some cases, they work very well together. The streamlined visa processing in many ways has almost forced higher education, TAFE and English language colleges to look much closer at how they might work in partnership. We know that the universities have a significant number of offshore partnerships and campuses, branch campuses. And in many cases they'll be operating in the same city that a TAFE's got a partnership. And I often wonder whether there's been any conversation whatsoever between those two institutions as to how they might create pathways in that country itself between a TAFE partnership and an Australian university partnership. Well, I think every institute's different. They've all got slightly different profiles. Some of our institutes are very much focused on a specific industry area, whether they're specialist tourism and hospitality colleges, or whether they focus on engineering or transport. So each of them will have their own approach to marketing and promoting, very much based on the industry links and the industry focus. So having said that, they all have their own brand. In Western Australia, they in many cases don't use the TAFE brand itself, although we know that it is very strong in many countries around the world. We've seen in the last 12 months a slight increase in students choosing to study at TAFE. We're back to figures close to the 2009. So we're still a small part of the overall international student market. We've got about 20,000 international students studying with TAFE at the moment. The challenge is to ensure that they're genuine students and they're not just seeking a pathway to skilled or permanent migration. That's always a challenge for us. I think many of them are looking at the streamlined visa processing as a good way of coming into Australia, probably for the best of intentions, but with less documentation required. So a lot of the increase for our sector has been in those pathways programs. There's, I think there's not a single approach that's going to be the magic potion, the magic cure. I think everybody has to look at a really wide range of strategies. So certainly we've relied very heavily on agents, and I imagine that will continue. But at the same token, I see social media as being clearly a major platform of making students or potential students aware of what's on offer, and also collecting that, building up that conversation amongst students who've studied in Australia and those who are thinking about it. We also know that parents are incredibly influential when it comes to student choice. So I think some strategies that focus very much from a family perspective will be important. We can certainly see online education as a very attractive component, but at the same time in our area it's very much skills based, and so we would expect, you know, the emergence of the MOOCs and various other online models. It's certainly part of our offering, but we've certainly not relied wholly on an online study where the student stays in their own country.